The moment Carlos Rivera's voice hit the first note, the recording studio went silent. Not the kind of silence that comes from politeness, but the kind that steals breath from lungs. The kind that makes even the most jaded music producer forget to blink. And standing there, microphone still warm in her manicured hand, international pop sensation Vivian Cross felt something she hadn't experienced in a decade of sold-out world tours. Fear. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. 3 hours earlier, Carlos had pushed his cleaning cart through the marble lobby of Titanium Sound Studios, the same way he'd done every weeknight for the past 9 months. The wheels squeaked. They always squeaked. He'd asked maintenance to fix them twice, but in a building where hourly studio rates cost more than his monthly rent, a janitor's cart didn't register as priority. The clock above the reception desk read 9:47 p.m. Most of the daytime staff had gone home. The real sessions, the ones with artists who could afford midnight rates, were just beginning. Carlos was 42 years old. His hands were rough from industrial cleaners, his back ached from years of night shifts, and his daughter Emma needed new shoes. Again, 7-year-old feet grew fast. She'd mentioned it 3 times this week, never asking directly, just commenting that her toes felt squishy in her sneakers. She had his eyes, his late wife's smile, and a careful way of wanting things that broke his heart every single time. They lived in a 1-bedroom apartment in Van Nuys. Emma slept in the bedroom. Carlos took the couch. It folded out, technically, but the mechanism had broken last year and he'd never found the money to fix it. He slept in a sleeping bag now, like he was camping. Emma thought that was funny. She didn't know the electricity bill was 2 weeks overdue, or that he'd been eating 1 meal a day so she could have 2. The hallway to Studio C smelled like expensive coffee and someone's vanilla perfume. Carlos knocked twice, waited for the engineer's signal, then entered. The room was empty except for equipment and the faint hum of climate control. He emptied the trash, wiped down surfaces, checked the bathroom. Efficient. Invisible. The way good janitors were supposed to be. He was cleaning the mirror in the vocal booth when he heard them coming. Voices in the hallway. Laughter. The kind of laughter that came easy to people who'd never worried about shoe money. I'm telling you, the acoustics in C are better than A woman's voice said. Vivian Cross. Carlos recognized it from Emma's playlist. His daughter loved her music, played it on their ancient iPod every morning while eating cereal. Just one take. I want to hear how it sits in a raw space. Carlos moved quickly, gathering his supplies. Protocol was clear. When sessions started, cleaning staff disappeared. He was reaching for his cart when the door opened. Vivian Cross stood 5 feet 6 inches tall in heels that probably cost more than Carlos made in a month. Her hair was the kind of blonde that required a team. She wore ripped jeans that were meant to look casual but fit like they'd been custom-made, which they probably had been. 2 people flanked her, assistants or friends or whatever surrounded famous people at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. Behind them, a man in a blazer Carlos recognized as the studio's owner, Greg Hartman. Oh, Vivian said, looking at Carlos the way someone might notice a chair. You're still here. Just finishing, Ms. Cross, Carlos said. He'd learned the right tone years ago. Polite but not familiar. Present but not intrusive. I'll be out of your way in 30 seconds. No rush, Greg Hartman said, but his eyes said the opposite. Carlos is our best night custodian. Keeps everything perfect. Vivian walked past Carlos into the booth, testing the space with her hands like she could feel the sound. One of her assistants, a young man with an earring and an expression of permanent boredom, scrolled through his phone. The other, a woman with a tablet, was already pulling up files. Carlos pushed his cart toward the door. Almost out. Almost invisible again. Wait, Vivian said. He stopped. She was looking at him now, really looking, and Carlos felt the weight of it. Not attraction, not interest, something else. Calculation. Greg says you're good at your job, she said. Thorough. I try to be. You know who I am. Yes. My daughter's a fan of your music. That made her smile. The smile looked practiced. Sweet. How old? 7. Adorable age. She turned to Greg. He's been here how long? Almost a year, Greg said. There was something careful in his voice now. Carlos had heard that tone before, usually right before something went wrong. Vivian walked closer. She smelled like expensive perfume and studio air conditioning. Can I ask you something personal, Carlos? Sure. Do you sing? The question landed strange. Carlos blinked. Sometimes. To my daughter. But can you actually sing? Were you trained? The answer was complicated. Years ago, another lifetime ago, before Emma was born and before Maria got sick and before the hospital bills made singing seem like a luxury he couldn't afford, Carlos had studied music. Not at a fancy school, but at a community college with a professor who saw something in him. He'd performed at weddings, at church, at a few small venues where the pay was in drink tickets and applause. He had a voice. People had told him that. But that was before life got heavy. I studied a little, he said. Long time ago. Vivian's eyes lit up in a way that made Carlos nervous. Okay, this is perfect. Tyler, pull up echoes of us on the system. The board assistant tapped his phone. Music filled the studio, a backing track without vocals. Carlos recognized it. Emma played this song constantly. It was Vivian's biggest hit from 3 years ago, the one that made her stadium famous instead of just arena famous. Here's what I'm thinking, Vivian said, and her voice had changed. It was brighter now, performative, like she was talking to a camera. I want to test the booth's natural reverb, but I don't want to use my voice yet. I need to save it for the real session. So you're going to sing it? Carlos stared. Just the chorus. In the booth. I'll listen from out here and see how it sounds. She gestured to the enclosed space. Come on, it'll be fun. Tyler, you're recording this, right? Tyler held up his phone. Always. Something cold moved through Carlos's chest. This wasn't fun. This was something else. He looked at Greg Hartman, who was carefully studying the flaw. Ms. Cross, I should really finish. Oh, come on, Vivian said. Don't be shy. Your daughter would think it's cool, right? Her dad's singing her favorite song in a real studio. She was already guiding him toward the booth, her hand light on his arm but insistent. Just the chorus. One time through. Unless you can't. There it was. The edge in the last 2 words. The challenge. Carlos had been poor long enough to recognize a trap. But he'd also been poor long enough to know that saying no to people like Vivian Cross had consequences. Greg signed his paychecks. Greg was friends with Vivian Cross. The math wasn't complicated. He stepped into the booth. The door closed behind him with a soft click. Through the glass, he could see Vivian and her assistants arranging themselves on the leather couch. Tyler had his phone up, recording. The tablet woman was smirking. Greg stood off to the side, arms crossed. The backing track started. Carlos closed his eyes. He thought about Emma. About her squeaky voice singing this song while brushing her teeth. About the way she'd been lately, quieter than normal, trying so hard not to be a burden. About the school music program she'd mentioned once, just once, and never brought up again because she already knew they couldn't afford it. He opened his mouth and sang. The first note came out clean. The second one stronger. By the third line of the chorus, Carlos had stopped thinking about the glass wall and the watching eyes and the phone recording everything. He was in the song, not performing it, living inside it. His voice had weight, the kind of depth that comes from years of holding things in. When he hit the high note that Vivian made famous, he didn't strain. He lifted into it like stepping upstairs. He opened his eyes. Through the booth glass, Vivian Cross's smile had vanished. Tyler's phone was still recording, but his mouth was open. The tablet woman had set down her device. Greg Hartman looked like someone had told him his building was on fire. The backing track ended. Silence filled the booth, then leaked into the control room beyond. Carlos stood there, heart pounding, suddenly aware of how badly he'd miscalculated. He wasn't supposed to be good. He was supposed to be bad, or average, or awkward. Something they could laugh about later. Something that made Vivian look generous for giving him the chance and superior when he failed. He'd just outsung a woman who'd sold 40 million records. The booth door opened. Vivian's face had arranged itself back into professional neutrality, but her eyes were sharp. That was interesting, she said. Her voice was controlled now. Careful. Where did you say you studied? Community college, Carlos said. But that was And you work here as a janitor because... The question was casual. The subtext wasn't. Carlos felt it like a hand around his throat. Because I have a daughter to feed, he said quietly. Right. Of course. Vivian looked at Tyler. Delete that. The video. Yes, Tyler, the video. Delete it. But it's... Delete it. Tyler's thumb moved across his phone screen. Carlos watched him do it. Watch whatever had just happened get erased. His voice. His one moment. Gone. Thanks for the help, Carlos, Vivian said. She was walking away now, her assistants following. You can finish cleaning. We'll come back later. They left. All of them. Greg gave Carlos one long look that said a dozen things, none of them good, and followed. The studio was empty again. Carlos stood in the booth, his hands shaking. Not from fear, from something else. Something that felt like humiliation and rage mixed together into a taste like copper. He finished cleaning. He always finished cleaning. His cart squeaked down the hallway, past the gold records on the walls, past the framed photos of famous artists who'd recorded here. People who mattered. People whose voices got to exist. He clocked out at 11:15 p.m. The night supervisor, an older woman named Betty who always remembered to ask about Emma, looked at him carefully. You okay, Carlos? You look upset. Long night, he said. They work you too hard. She shook her head. Get home safe, honey. The bus ride to Van Nuys took 40 minutes. Carlos watched the city lights blur past the window, thinking about Emma asleep in their apartment, about Vivian Cross's face when she told Tyler to delete the video, about the way his own voice had sounded in that booth. Strong, real, like something that mattered. His phone buzzed. A text from the landlord. Rent was due in 3 days. They were already late from last month. Carlos closed his eyes and leaned his head against the cold bus window. Tomorrow he'd wake up at 6 a.m. Make Emma breakfast. Walk her to school. Sleep for a few hours. Wake up. Eat. Get on the bus. Clock in. Push his cart through marble lobbies. Be invisible. Be careful. Be quiet. Tomorrow he'd be a janitor again. Tonight, for 3 minutes in a recording booth, he'd been something else. And Vivian Cross had made sure no one would ever know. Looking at the streets of Van Nuys through his apartment window at 7 a.m., Carlos could almost pretend the night before hadn't happened. The sun was coming up pink and orange over the palm trees. Emma was humming in the bathroom, brushing her teeth. The coffee maker was gurgling. This was normal. This was his life. Last night was just another strange moment in a city full of them. Gone now, deleted like Tyler's video. Except it wasn't gone. Not in the way that mattered. Carlos had heard his own voice. Really heard it. For years, he'd sung quietly to Emma at bedtime, or in the shower where no one could judge him, or sometimes in his head while pushing the cleaning cart through silent hallways. But last night, in a booth designed to capture every frequency of human sound, he'd remembered what his voice could do. What it had done, once, before Maria got sick. Before everything got complicated. He was spreading peanut butter on bread for Emma's lunch when his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then realized it might be the landlord. Hello. Carlos Rivera. A woman's voice. Professional. Not the landlord. Speaking. This is Janet Chen from Titanium Sound Studios. I'm calling about your employment. The peanut butter knife went still in his hand. Is something wrong? We need you to come in today for a meeting with Mr. Hartman. Can you be here at 2 p.m.? I work nights. My shift doesn't start until. This is regarding a serious matter, Mr. Rivera. 2 p.m. Don't be late. She hung up. Carlos stood in his tiny kitchen, holding the phone, feeling the bottom drop out of his stomach. Emma came out of the bathroom in her school uniform, a blue polo shirt that was getting small on her. Daddy, you okay? He put on a smile. The same one he wore when the electricity bill came, when her shoes got too tight, when she asked about Mommy and he had to explain death all over again in terms a 7-year-old could understand. I'm great, Mija. Come eat breakfast. But he wasn't great. He was terrified. The morning moved like cold syrup. Carlos walked Emma to school, holding her hand, barely hearing her chatter about a science project. He came home, tried to sleep, couldn't. At 1 p.m., he put on his cleanest jeans and a button-up shirt and took 2 buses to Burbank. Greg Hartman's office was on the 3rd floor, all glass and chrome and photos of him shaking hands with famous people. His secretary, a young man with perfect teeth, told Carlos to wait. He waited. 20 minutes. 30. At 2:35, the door opened. "Mr. Rivera," Greg said. Not Carlos anymore. "Mr. Rivera." That was a bad sign. "Come in." The office had a view of the hills. Leather chairs. A desk that probably cost more than Carlos's car. Back when he'd owned a car. Greg sat behind it. He didn't invite Carlos to sit. "I'm going to get right to it," Greg said. "We're letting you go." The words hit like fists. Carlos's ears rang. "I don't understand. Your performance has been unsatisfactory." "My performance? You told Ms. Cross I was your best night custodian." "That was before last night." Greg folded his hands. His wedding ring caught the light. "After you left, we discovered several areas you'd neglected. The Studio C bathroom wasn't properly stocked. The control room had visible dust. That's unacceptable for a facility of this caliber." Carlos stared. "That's not true. I cleaned everything. I always." "Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Rivera?" The question was sharp. A warning. Carlos recognized the shape of this conversation now. He'd seen it before, in other jobs, other cities. This wasn't about cleaning. This was about making someone disappear. "No, sir." "Good. We'll pay you through today. You can pick up your final check at reception." Greg turned to his computer. Conversation over. Carlos had been dismissed. "Was it her?" Carlos asked. His voice came out quiet. Steady. "Did Ms. Cross ask you to fire me?" Greg didn't look up. "Ms. Cross is a valued client who brings substantial business to this studio. We take her concerns seriously. I didn't do anything wrong. You should have declined when she asked you to sing. It was inappropriate. It made her uncomfortable." The injustice of it burned like swallowed glass. Carlos had been set up. Vivian had wanted him to be bad, to be mockable, to be proof that talent came from training and money and connections, not from janitors and venues. When he'd been good instead, she'd made him dangerous. And dangerous people got erased. "I have a daughter," Carlos said. "I need this job. You should have thought of that before making a client uncomfortable." Greg finally looked up. His eyes were cold. "We done here, Mr. Rivera. Don't make this difficult." Carlos left. The secretary handed him an envelope with his final check. $480 for 2 weeks of work. Not enough to cover rent. Not even close. He walked out of Titanium Sound Studios at 3 p.m. on a Wednesday afternoon, newly unemployed, with $43 in his checking account and a daughter who needed shoes. The buses back to Van Nuys felt longer. Hotter. Every stop took an hour. Carlos stayed at his hands. Working hands. Honest hands. Hands that had cleaned toilets and mopped floors and never stolen, never cut corners, never done anything except try to keep his daughter fed and safe. It wasn't enough. It had never been enough. When he got home, Emma was at the neighbor's. Mrs. Kowalski, a retired teacher who watched her after school for $20 a week that Carlos could barely afford but needed desperately. He picked Emma up, thanked Mrs. Kowalski, brought his daughter home. "How was school?" "Good. We started our solar system projects. I'm doing Venus." "That's great, baby. Can we get poster board this weekend?" This weekend he'd need to be looking for work. Every hour would count. But he said, of course. They had spaghetti for dinner. The cheap kind, 99 cents a box. Emma ate 3 helpings. Carlos ate 1. Told her he wasn't hungry. Save the rest for tomorrow. While she did homework at the kitchen table, he searched job listings on his phone. Security positions. Warehouse work. Nothing that would pay enough. Nothing that would start soon enough. At 8 p.m., his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Heard what happened. That's messed up. I'm sorry." Carlos stayed at the message. "Who is this?" 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Then, Tyler. From last night. Vivian's assistant. Carlos's hands tightened on the phone. "You deleted the video." "She told me to. I work for her." "Then why are you texting me?" "Because what she did was wrong." A pause. "And because I didn't actually delete it." Carlos's heart stopped. What? I deleted it from my camera roll, but I uploaded it to a cloud backup first. I do that with all her sessions. She doesn't know. Another pause. If you want it, I can send you the link. Carlos looked at Emma, bent over her math homework, chewing the end of a pencil. He thought about Vivian Cross in her custom-ripped jeans and her practice smile. About Greg Hartman's cold eyes. About the way powerful people could erase you with a phone call. He thought about his voice in that booth. The way it had felt to sing something real. Send it, he typed. The link came through 30 seconds later. Carlos clicked it. The video loaded. There he was, grainy but clear, standing in the Studio C booth. The backing track started. His voice followed. It was good. Better than good. He could hear it objectively now, without the fear. His tone was rich. His control was precise. When he hit the high note, it soared. Phew. Powerful. The kind of voice that made people stop and listen. The video ended. In the final frame, you could see Vivian's face through the booth glass. The shock on it. The anger. What are you going to do with it? Tyler texted. Carlos didn't know. He stayed at the video, at his own face on the screen, at the evidence of a moment that wasn't supposed to exist. I'm sorry again. Tyler texted. Good luck. The conversation ended. Carlos sat in his apartment with the sounds of Emma's pencil scratching paper and traffic humming outside and his whole life crumbling around him like wet cardboard. He had a video of himself singing. He had $480. He had no job and no prospects and a daughter who needed shoes. What could he possibly do with any of it? Emma looked up from her homework. Daddy, you're making a sad face. I'm just tired, Mija. Is it because you miss Mommy? The question came out of nowhere, the way children's questions did. Honest and sharp and impossible to dodge. Yeah, Carlos said. I miss Mommy. Me too. Emma went back to her math problems. But she would want us to be happy. That's what you always say. Carlos looked at his daughter, 7 years old. Maria's eyes. His stubbornness. Still believing that wanting to be happy was enough to make it happen. He opened the video again. Watched himself sing. Listened to his own voice tell a story about echoes and loss and things that almost were. Maria had believed in his singing once. Before the cancer, before the medical debt, before everything good got traded away for more time that still wasn't enough, she'd told him he was going to make it. That his voice mattered. That someone would hear it and recognize what she heard. Something true. She'd been wrong about the making it part. But maybe she'd been right about the rest. Carlos looked at his phone. At the video. At the proof that he was more than a janitor, more than invisible, more than the person Vivian Cross could erase with a phone call. He opened a new app. The one Emma used to watch videos of kittens and slime tutorials. The one where anybody could post anything and maybe, if they were lucky, somebody would watch. His thumb hovered over the upload button. This could go wrong in so many ways. Vivian had lawyers, resources, power. She could make his life even worse than it already was, which seemed impossible but probably wasn't. She could sue him, blacklist him, make sure he never worked in any studio, any venue, anywhere that mattered. But she'd already done that. She'd already taken his job. She'd already made him invisible. What else could she take? Carlos pressed upload. He wrote a caption, "Fired from my job after singing for a famous artist." Here's what she didn't want you to hear. He tagged it with Vivian Cross's name, with Titanium Sound Studios, with the song title. He hit post. Then he put his phone down, walked to the kitchen, and finished making Emma's lunch for tomorrow. Because that's what you did. You kept going. You packed lunchies and paid bills and held things together with will and tape and the belief that maybe, someone was watching. By bedtime, the video had 37 views. By midnight, it had 3,000. By 3 a.m., when Carlos woke up to check, it had 40,000 views and counting. His phone was full of notifications, comments, shares, messages from people he didn't know telling him his voice was beautiful, that they couldn't believe he was a janitor, that Vivian Cross should be ashamed. Carlos sat on his broken couch in the dark, watching the numbers climb, feeling something dangerous bloom in his chest. Hope. The video hit 1 million views at 8:47 a.m. on Thursday morning, while Carlos was making Emma's breakfast. The phone he'd left charging on the counter was buzzing so constantly it had vibrated to the edge of the surface. Emma noticed first. "Daddy, your phone is having a seizure." He caught it before it fell. The screen was full of notifications, so many the phone was struggling to load them. Comments, tags, news outlets. People with verified check marks next to their names were quoting the video, sharing it, adding their opinions. Some were supportive. Some were cruel. Most were shocked. That's the janitor who outsang Vivian Cross. Holy hell. This man's voice is insane. Why is he cleaning floors? Vivian's team is reportedly scrambling. Good. She's been overrated for years. This is what happens when talent meets desperation. That raw emotion can't be taught. Carlos scrolled through them, his coffee getting cold, Emma eating cereal and watching him with curious eyes. He'd barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he'd imagined lawyers or police or some other consequence he couldn't afford showing up at his door. But morning had come anyway. The sun was shining. Emma needed to get to school. "Are you famous?" Emma asked, milk dripping from her spoon. "No, baby." "Then why is your phone so loud?" How did you explain virality to a 7-year-old? How did you explain that sometimes the internet grabbed something random and decided it mattered, just for a day or a week, before moving on to the next thing? "Just some work stuff," he said. "Finish your cereal." His phone rang. Actual voice call. The number was local. Carlos answered carefully. "Mr. Rivera? This is Rachel Kim from Channel 7 News. We'd love to interview you about your experience at Titanium Sound Studios and your incredible performance. Would you be available today?" "I don't think that's a good idea. We could compensate you for your time. $500 for a 10-minute segment." Carlos's grip on the phone tightened. $500. That was rent. That was Emma's shoes and groceries for 2 weeks. "When?" he asked. "This afternoon. We could send a crew to your location, or you could come to our studio." He looked at his apartment. The peeling paint. The broken couch. The kitchen where everything was mismatched and worn. He didn't want cameras here. "I'll come to you," he said. "What time?" They scheduled it for 2 p.m. After he hung up, 3 more news outlets called. Then a radio station. Then someone who claimed to represent a talent agency, but wouldn't give specifics. Carlos stopped answering. He had to get Emma to school. Walking the 4 blocks to Roosevelt Elementary, Emma held his hand and talked about her Venus project while Carlos tried to understand what was happening. The video was still climbing. 2 million views. The comments were multiplying. People were arguing about Vivian Cross, about wealth inequality, about the music industry, about talent versus opportunity. His voice was in the middle of it all, the evidence that launched 1,000 opinions. At the school gate, Emma's teacher, Mrs. Patterson, waved at them. She was young, enthusiastic, the kind of teacher who decorated her classroom with student artwork and sent encouraging notes home. "Emma tells me you're a musician, Mr. Rivera," she said. "That's wonderful. We have a music showcase next month if you'd like to volunteer." Carlos blinked. He hadn't told Emma he was a musician. He'd barely thought of himself that way in years. "Maybe," he said. "Great. We'll talk soon." She ushered Emma inside, and Carlos was left standing on the sidewalk with his phone still buzzing and the certainty that his life had just taken a turn he couldn't control. The Channel 7 interview was professional. Too professional. They put makeup on his face, seated him under bright lights, asked questions that were clearly designed to make Vivian look worse. "Did she mock you? Did she laugh? Did she fire you personally?" Carlos answered carefully, honestly, trying not to embellish. The interviewer looked disappointed. "You're being very gracious about someone who cost you your livelihood." "I'm just trying to tell the truth," Carlos said. The segment aired at 6 p.m. Carlos watched it at home with Emma, who was delighted to see her father on television even though she didn't understand why. The news anchor called it a David versus Goliath story for the modern age. They played a clip of Carlos singing, then cut to Vivian Cross performing the same song at a sold-out arena. The contrast was intentional. Carlos sounded raw, emotional, real. Vivian sounded polished, perfect, manufactured. His phone exploded again. 5 million views now. 10 million. The video was being picked up by international outlets. People in the comments were tagging record labels, tagging famous producers, tagging other artists asking why they weren't speaking up about this. And then, at 9 p.m., Vivian Cross posted a statement on social media. Carlos read it 3 times, each word feeling like a small stone in his stomach. I'm deeply saddened by the false narrative surrounding my recent studio session. I invited Mr. Rivera to showcase his talent as an act of kindness, hoping to encourage his passion for music. His performance was lovely, and I never requested his termination. Any claims otherwise are misunderstandings. I wish him well in his future endeavors. The comments under her post were split. Her fans believed her immediately. His supporters called her a liar. The truth was somewhere in the middle, complicated and messy and impossible to prove. Carlos set his phone down. Emma was asleep on the couch next to him, exhausted from the excitement of the day. He looked at her peaceful face and felt the weight of responsibility like a physical thing pressing on his chest. The video had given him visibility. The news interview had given him credibility. Vivian's response had given him enemies. And none of it had given him a job. His phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. He almost didn't answer, then recognized the area code. Burbank. Maybe it was the studio calling to apologize, to offer his job back, to make this right. Hello. Carlos Rivera. A man's voice this time. Deep. Confident. Yes. My name is David Park. I'm a talent manager based in Los Angeles. I've seen your video. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss representation. Carlos sat up straighter. Representation. You have something special. Raw talent, compelling story, viral moment. That's a combination that opens doors. But you need guidance to walk through them correctly. A pause. I've worked with artists who've gone from nothing to stadium tours. I can do the same for you. If you're interested. I'm a janitor with a kid. I don't have money for a manager. I don't get paid unless you get paid. That's how this works. Meet with me. 1 hour. If you're not convinced, walk away. No obligation. Carlos looked at Emma. At the apartment. At the phone in his hand that held a video of his voice reaching millions of people who'd never know his name if he let this moment pass. Okay, he said. Tomorrow. Where? They set a time. When Carlos hung up, his hands were shaking. Not from fear this time. From something bigger. Something that felt like possibility mixed with terror. He checked the video one more time before bed. 20 million views. Comments in languages he didn't recognize. Think pieces being written. Vivian Cross's name was trending alongside his own. But trending didn't pay rent. Viral didn't buy shoes. Fame was just attention. And attention had a short memory. Carlos lay on his broken couch and stared at the ceiling, listening to Emma breathe in the next room, and wondered if any of this would matter tomorrow. Approximate word count. 1,350 words. The coffee shop in Silver Lake where David Park wanted to meet was the kind of place that charged $7 for a latte and had exposed brick walls covered in local art. Carlos arrived 20 minutes early, wearing his best shirt, which wasn't saying much. The hostess looked at him like he might be lost. I'm meeting someone, he said. David Park. Her expression changed. Recognition. Mr. Park's table is in the back. Follow me. David Park looked exactly like Carlos expected a Los Angeles talent manager to look. Mid-40s, expensive watch, casual clothes that probably cost more than a month of Carlos's old salary. He stewed when Carlos approached, shook his hand with feigned confidence. Carlos, thanks for coming. Sit, please. Order whatever you want. Carlos ordered black coffee. Cheapest thing on the menu. David noticed, smiled slightly, didn't comment. I'll be direct, David said once the waitress left. Your video has 28 million views as of this morning. That's significant. But views alone don't build a career. What builds a career is strategy, timing, and knowing how to turn attention into opportunity. I'm not sure what that means for someone like me. Someone like you is exactly who this benefits. You have authenticity. You have a story. You have undeniable talent captured in a moment of raw emotion. That's gold in an industry that's drowning in manufactured content. David pulled out a tablet, started scrolling. I've already had preliminary conversations with 3 record labels. They are interested. Very interested. Carlos felt his stomach tighten. Record labels. Small ones, admittedly. Not the major players yet. But they are legitimate, they have distribution, and they are hungry for someone who can cut through the noise. He turned the tablet to show Carlos. Names of companies he'd never heard of. Numbers that made his head spin. This one is offering a 3-album deal. Advance of $50,000. That's not huge by industry standards, but for someone starting from zero, it's life-changing. David scrolled further. This one is smaller but offers more creative control. $25,000 advance. Lower royalty percentage, but you'd have input on production. $50,000. Carlos tried to imagine that number in his bank account. Tried to imagine what it would mean for Emma. New shoes. A bigger apartment. Food that wasn't 99-cent pasta. Security. What's the catch? Carlos asked. Smart question. David set the tablet down. The catch is that you'd be signing your voice, your image, your story to a contract. They'd own your music for the term of the agreement. You'd have recording obligations, appearance requirements, promotional duties. It's work. Hard work. And if you fail, if the album doesn't perform, they can drop you and you're back where you started, except now you're known as the guy who got a shot and blew it. That sounds terrifying. It should. This industry eats people alive. But here's what I believe about you, Carlos. David leaned forward. You're not in this for fame. You're in this for survival. That makes you dangerous in the best way. You won't waste the opportunity because you can't afford to. And that hunger, that desperation, it comes through in your voice. People hear it. They respond to it. Carlos thought about the video. About singing in that booth while Vivian Cross watched. About the way his voice had felt like the only honest thing in a room full of performance. I have a daughter, he said. She's 7. If I do this, it can't interfere with taking care of her. We'll build that into any deal. Studio time during school hours. Local performances until you're established. I'm not interested in making you a star if it means destroying your life. I'm interested in sustainable success. And you get what out of this? 20% of everything you earn through my management, which is standard, but I only earn if you earn, so my incentive is to make you as successful as possible. David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, smiled. And speaking of success, you're about to get a lot more attention. What do you mean? David turned his phone around. Carlos saw a tweet from a verified account he recognized. A famous music producer. Someone with 15 million followers. Just listen to the Titanium Sound Janitor video on repeat for an hour. This man has more soul in one chorus than most albums have in their entire runtime. Someone sign him before I do. Below it, replies were flooding in. Other verified accounts. More producers. Artists. People with influence offering opinions. Sharing the video again. Demanding someone give Carlos a chance. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small. Too bright. Carlos could feel his pulse in his throat. This is happening fast, he said. It's going to happen faster. By next week, major labels will be calling. Bigger offers. More pressure. You need representation before that happens, or they'll eat you alive. David pulled out a contract, set it on the table. This is a standard management agreement. 60 days, trial basis. If we don't like working together, either of us can walk away. After that, we negotiate long-term terms. Read it. Take it to a lawyer if you want. I'm not trying to trap you. Carlos looked at the contract. Legal language he barely understood. Clauses about percentages and obligations and termination conditions. It might as well have been written in another language. I don't have money for a lawyer. I know a few who do pro bono work for artists. I can connect you. David's phone buzzed again. He looked at it, and something changed in his expression. Carlos, I need to tell you something. Vivian Cross's team just released another statement. It's not good. He showed Carlos the screen. A longer post this time, carefully worded, with screenshots attached. After careful review of the situation with Mr. Rivera, we've discovered discrepancies in his account. The studio has confirmed that his cleaning performance had been substandard for weeks prior to the incident in question. Additionally, Mr. Rivera was not invited to sing but rather inserted himself into a private session and refused to leave when asked. We have witness testimony supporting this. While we appreciate his talent, we cannot allow false accusations to damage Ms. Cross's reputation. Below the post, screenshots, text messages supposedly from studio employees confirming Vivian's version. Photos of Studio C with visible dust on surfaces. A time-stamped security log showing Carlos entering the studio before he was scheduled. Carlos stared at them, feeling ice spread through his chest. Those texts are fake. That dust isn't from my night. That log doesn't prove anything. I know, David said, but it doesn't matter if they are real. What matters is that her team is fighting back, and they have resources. This is about to get ugly. So what do? You keep telling the truth. You don't engage with her directly. You let your voice speak for itself. David tapped the contract, and you let me handle the business side while you focus on the music. That's what managers are for. Carlos looked at the paper, at the numbers and clauses and promises of a life he'd stopped dreaming about years ago. He thought about Emma, about Maria, about singing in churches and at weddings when he still believed his voice could mean something beyond survival. He thought about Vivian Cross and her manufactured posts and her team of people paid to make problems disappear. He picked up the pen. 60 days trial basis, he said. After that, we renegotiate. Deal. David shook his hand again. Welcome to the industry, Carlos. It's going to be a hell of a ride. Carlos signed the contract while his coffee got cold and his phone continued to buzz with notifications from a world that suddenly wanted to know his name. When he got home that afternoon, Emma was at Mrs. Kowalski's. He picked her up, thanked her, brought his daughter home. They had mac and cheese for dinner, the cheap kind. But soon, maybe, they'd be able to afford the kind with real cheese. Daddy, kids at school are saying you're famous, Emma said, twirling pasta on her fork. I'm not famous, baby. I just sang a song that a lot of people heard. But that's what famous means. Maybe she was right. Maybe fame was just being heard, being seen, mattering to strangers who'd never know your rent was late or your kid needed shoes or you'd been invisible for so long that visibility felt like standing under a spotlight that could burn you alive. I guess it is, Carlos said. That night, after Emma was asleep, Carlos sat on his broken couch and opened the video one more time. 40 million views now. The numbers were getting abstract, meaningless. But the voice in the video was still his, still real, still the only honest thing he had left. His phone buzzed. Text from David. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. First recording session. Studio in Glendale. They want to lay down a demo track. You ready? Carlos looked at his daughter's bedroom door, at the sleeping bag on the floor where he'd spent another night, at the bills on the counter he still couldn't pay. He typed back, ready. But he wasn't sure if that was true. The recording studio in Glendale was called West Side Sound, and it was nothing like Titanium. No marble lobby, no gold records on the walls. Just a small converted warehouse with decent equipment and a producer named Mike who wore flannel and had kind eyes. You're the janitor, Mike said when Carlos arrived. Not a question, a statement of fact. Used to be, Carlos said. Right. Well, today you're a recording artist. How's that feel? Terrifying. Mike laughed. Good. If it makes you honest. Come on, let me show you the booth. It was smaller than the one at Titanium. The microphone was older, but when Carlos put on the headphones and heard the backing track Mike had prepared, something settled in his chest. This was real. Not a setup, not a joke. An actual chance to record something that might matter. We're going to start simple, Mike said through the talkback. Original song. I wrote something based on your story. Listen through once, then we'll try a take. The music started. Piano, strings, a melody that felt like sunrise after a long night. Then Mike's voice, reading lyrics off a page. They tried to make me small, tried to make me fade, but my voice was never theirs to take away. I sang for those who couldn't, stood where others fell, and now the echoes of my heart have a story to tell. Carlos closed his eyes. The words weren't perfect. Too on the nose, maybe. But they were his. His story. His truth. You ready? Mike asked. Yeah. The track started over. Carlos sang. It took 6 takes to get it right. Not because he couldn't hit the notes, but because emotion kept overwhelming technique. His voice would crack on certain words. Specific phrases that reminded him of Emma, of Maria, of nights when he couldn't sleep because the fear was too loud. But on the 7th take, something clicked. The emotion and the technique merged. His voice became an instrument of both pain and hope. When he finished, Mike was quiet for a long moment. Then, that's the one. That's going to change everything. They worked for 4 hours, recorded 3 songs. Each one pulled something different out of Carlos. Anger on one, grief on another, a tentative, fragile hope on the third. By the time they finished, Carlos's voice was raw and his hands were shaking and he felt like he'd run a marathon. "These are going out to labels tonight," Mike said. "David's already got interest. This is going to move fast." Carlos drove home in his 13-year-old Honda, listening to the rough mixes Mike had sent to his phone. His voice filled the car. Professional. Real. Like someone who deserved to be heard. But when he got home, reality was waiting. 3 envelopes under his door. 2 were bills. Red ink. Final notice. The 3rd was from his landlord. Formal eviction notice. He had 10 days to pay 3 months of back rent or vacate the premises. Carlos sat on his broken couch and did the math. The Channel 7 interview had paid $500. He'd spent $200 on groceries and Emma's poster board and bus fare. The recording session didn't pay anything. David had explained that demos were an investment. You spent money to make money. But Carlos didn't have money to spend. 3 months of rent was $400 to $200. He had $300 in his bank account. The eviction was happening. No amount of viral videos or recording sessions or promises from talent managers could stop it. His phone rang. "David." "Good news," David said. "2 labels want to make offers. We're looking at meetings next week. One is talking 6 figures for a multi-album deal." "That's great," Carlos said. His voice sounded flat even to himself. "You don't sound excited." "I got an eviction notice. I have 10 days. Silence on the line. Then, how much do you need?" "400 to $200. But I can't ask you to." "You're not asking. I'm offering. Consider it an advance against future earnings. I'll wire it tonight." Carlos felt something break in his chest. Not bad. The opposite. Like pressure releasing. "I can't pay you back right now. You'll pay me back when you're selling out arenas. For now, focus on the music. I'll handle the rest." That night, Carlos paid his back rent online. All of it. Cleared. The relief was physical. He could breathe again. Emma could stay in her school. They didn't have to pack their lives into boxes and hope someone would take them in. But the relief came with weight. He owed David Park $400 to $200. He owed the universe proof that this wasn't a mistake. He owed his daughter stability. He owed Maria's memory something worth the sacrifice she'd made by dying slowly while he held her hand and promised he'd take care of their girl. The video hit 60 million views that night. Comments were still coming in. Some supportive, some cruel. People were now diving into Carlos's life, finding his old social media posts, his marriage certificate, Maria's obituary. They were turning his pain into content, into gossip, into a story they could consume and forget. Vivian Cross posted another statement. This one was shorter. "I've been advised to stop addressing this situation, as it's clear certain parties are seeking attention at my expense. I wish Mr. Rivera well and hope he finds success. I will not be commenting further." The subtext was clear. She was done engaging. She'd weathered the storm. Her fans were back to defending her. The news cycle was moving on. In a week, maybe 2, Carlos would be forgotten and she'd still be selling out stadiums. Unless he wasn't forgotten. Unless the music was good enough to matter beyond the moment. Unless his voice could do what he'd always hoped it could. Reach people in the dark and remind them they weren't alone. Carlos opened his recording app. The demos were there. He listened to them one more time. They were good. Not perfect, but good. Real. True. It would have to be enough. Emma came out of a bedroom, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy, I had a bad dream." "Come here, baby." She climbed onto the couch next to him, curled against his side. She smelled like the lavender soap Mrs. Kowalski always used. Like safety. Like home. What was the dream about? "We had to leave. Like when we left our old apartment, and I couldn't find my stuffed rabbit. The old apartment had been nicer. They'd left it 6 months after Maria died because Carlos couldn't afford it anymore. Emma had been 6. She'd cried for 3 days. "We're not leaving, Mija. I promise." "You promise, promise." "I promise, promise." She believed him. Children did that. They believed promises even when the world gave them every reason not to. Carlos held her until she fell back asleep, then carried her to bed. He tucked her in, kissed her forehead, stood in the doorway watching her breathe. Whatever happened next, labels or failure or success or obscurity, he would keep this promise. Emma would stay in her school, in her bedroom, in a life that was stable enough to let her be a child. That was the only thing that mattered. Everything else was just noise. The label meeting started on Monday. 3 companies wanted to meet Carlos in person, hear him sing live, make their pitches. David scheduled them back-to-back, all in one exhausting day. Carlos borrowed a suit from Mrs. Kowalski's late husband. It was too big in the shoulders, too short in the legs, but it was clean and pressed and good enough. The first meeting was at a mid-size indie label in Santa Monica called Resonance Records. The office was small but professional. The executives were younger than Carlos expected. A woman named Jennifer who wore bright red lipstick did most of the talking. "We love your story," Jennifer said. "It's authentic, it's compelling, and your voice has this quality that's rare in modern music. Vulnerability without weakness. Pain without self-pity." "Thank you," Carlos said. "We're prepared to offer you a 2-album deal. $30,000 advance per album. Standard royalty split. We'd want the first album recorded and released within 8 months. Commercial singles, radio play, the full push." David, sitting next to Carlos, took notes. "And creative control. We'd collaborate. Carlos would have input, but ultimately we'd need to make decisions based on market research and our experience with what sells." Jennifer smiled. "We're good at what we do. We've broken artists before. Trust us to break you." The word break sat wrong in Carlos's stomach, like something fragile being snapped in half. The second meeting was at a larger label in Century City. All glass and steel and views of the city. The executive here was older, a man named Richard who wore a suit that probably cost more than Carlos's car. "I'll be honest," Richard said. "Your video is gold. Your voice is excellent. But the market for male vocalists doing emotional ballads is tricky right now. We'd need to position you carefully. Maybe more upbeat material. Something that plays at weddings and on morning radio." "I don't really do upbeat," Carlos said. "You would if that's what sold records." Richard leaned back in his leather chair. "Look, we're offering $75,000 advance. 3 albums. But we'd need you to be flexible. Image, sound, story. All of it gets shaped to maximize appeal. That's how you go from viral moment to actual career." David's pen stopped moving. Carlos could feel the tension in the silence. "What if I don't want to be shaped?" Carlos asked. Richard smiled. "Not kindly. Then you stay a janitor with a nice video and a story people forget in 3 weeks. Your choice." They left that meeting early. The third meeting was different. Smaller label, even smaller office. A converted loft in downtown Los Angeles with exposed pipes and secondhand furniture. The owner was a man in his 60s named Thomas Gray. He wore jeans and a t-shirt. His handshake was firm but gentle. "I'm not going to bullshit you," Thomas said once they were seated. "I can't compete with the big guys on money. I can offer you $20,000 advance, 1 album, and complete creative control. You write what you want. You sing what you want. I produce it, we release it, and we see what happens." "That's it?" David asked. "No marketing push. No radio strategy." "Oh, we'll market. I'm not an idiot. But I've been in this business 40 years, and I've learned something. Authentic music finds its audience. You can't manufacture that. You can't force it." Thomas looked at Carlos. "Your voice doesn't need to be shaped or positioned or market tested. It just needs to be heard. That's what I'm offering. A platform to be heard, exactly as you are." Carlos felt something in his chest loosen. "Why?" "Because I heard your video and I cried. I'm 63 years old. I've heard every voice, every gimmick, every manufactured emotion in this industry. But your voice made me cry. That's rare. That's worth protecting. The room was quiet. Outside, Carlos could hear traffic. Sirens. The city moving forward like it always did, caring nothing about janitors or record deals or promises made to sleeping children. I need to think about this, Carlos said. Take your time, Thomas said. But not too much time. The internet has a short memory. Strike while you're still relevant. They left. In the car, David pulled out his notes. Okay, let's break it down. Resonance offers the most structure and the biggest immediate push. Century City offers the most money but the most control over your image. Thomas offers the least money but the most artistic freedom. David looked at Carlos. What are you thinking? I'm thinking I don't know anything about this business and I'm terrified of making the wrong choice. That's fair. But here's what I know. You're not going to be comfortable as a manufactured product. Richard would turn you into something safe and boring within 6 months. Jennifer would try to split the difference, but corporate interests would win eventually. Thomas is the only one treating you like an artist instead of a commodity. But his offer is the smallest. In money, yes. In opportunity to be yourself, it's the biggest. David put his notes away. But I'm your manager, not your conscience. You need to decide what matters more. Financial security now, or artistic integrity long-term. Carlos thought about Emma, about the rent he'd just paid with borrowed money, about bills and shoes and grocery store math. Financial security wasn't abstract. It was survival. But he also thought about Maria, about the way she'd looked at him when he sang in their tiny apartment when they were young and broke and stupidly hopeful, about the light in her eyes that said she heard something in his voice worth believing in. I need to talk to Emma, Carlos said. That night, after dinner, Carlos sat Emma down at their kitchen table. I need to ask you something important, Mija. Okay, I have a chance to make music. Real music that people would buy and listen to. But it means I'd be working a lot. Recording. Maybe traveling sometimes. Mrs. Kowalski would watch you more. You'd have to be brave. Emma looked at him with a mother's serious eyes. Would we have more money? Eventually, maybe. Not right away. Would you be happy? The question surprised him. What do you mean? You're always sad, Daddy, even when you smile. But when you sing, you look like you're not sad anymore. Carlos felt his throat tighten. 7 years old and she saw right through him. I want you to not be sad, Emma said. Even if it means Mrs. Kowalski babysits more. Even if you have to travel. I want you to sing. He pulled her into a hug. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on tight. Okay, he said. I'll sing. The next morning, Carlos called Thomas Gray. I want to sign with you, Carlos said. But I need the advance up front. I have bills. Done. I'll have the contract ready by tomorrow. Welcome to the family, Carlos. David negotiated the details. The $20,000 would cover rent for months, shoes for Emma, groceries, maybe even a better couch. It wasn't $75,000. It wasn't security, but it was enough. And more importantly, it was his voice, his songs, his truth. The contract was signed on Wednesday. On Thursday, Carlos went back to West Side Sound to start recording his first album. Thomas was there, sitting in the corner with coffee, listening quietly while Carlos and Mike worked through arrangements. Tell me about your wife, Thomas said during a break. Carlos hadn't expected the question. She died 3 years ago. Cancer. I'm sorry. Was she musical? She loved music. She's the one who believed I could do this, even when I didn't. Then this album is for her. Thomas stewed, walked to the booth window. People don't usually get second chances at dreams, Carlos. Most of us compromise ourselves into safe lives and die wondering what if. You're getting a what if. Don't waste it trying to be what someone else thinks you should be. Carlos nodded. He understood. This was about more than money or fame or proving Vivian Cross wrong. This was about honoring the voice Maria had heard in him when they were young and broke and stupid enough to believe love was enough. This was about being the man she'd thought he could be. They recorded for 6 days straight. 10 songs. Each one pulled from different parts of Carlos's life. His childhood. His marriage. Maria's death. Emma's birth. the struggle, the grief, the hope that refused to die even when everything else did. On the seventh day, they listened to the rough album front to back. Thomas cried during track 4. Mike got quiet during track 7. Carlos sat with his eyes closed, hearing his own voice tell stories he'd been too afraid to speak out loud. When it ended, Thomas said, "That's going to save lives." "It's just music," Carlos said. "There's no such thing as just music. Not when it's true." The album was scheduled for release in 6 weeks. Thomas would handle distribution, marketing, playlist placement. David would coordinate with media outlets, set up interviews, build momentum. Carlos's job was to be ready. Ready to be heard. Ready to be seen. Ready to step into a life that felt too big for someone who'd spent years making himself small. That night, Carlos sat on his broken couch with Emma asleep in the next room and his phone silent for once and let himself imagine it. Not fame, not fortune, just a life where his voice mattered, where the years of pain and struggle and silent grief transformed into something that reached other people in their own darkness and reminded them they weren't alone. Maria would have liked that. Maybe she would have been proud. Carlos closed his eyes and let himself believe, just for a moment, that this was possible. That janitors could become artists. That viral videos could become careers. That voices buried under years of survival could rise up and sing. The album dropped on a Tuesday morning in October, 6 weeks after Carlos signed with Thomas Gray. It was called Echoes, which felt both obvious and exactly right. Thomas had pushed for something more specific, more tied to Carlos's story. But Carlos wanted the music to stand independent of the narrative. He wanted people to listen because the songs were good, not because the story was compelling. The internet had other ideas. Within 2 hours of release, every music blog and entertainment site was covering it. Viral Janitor releases debut album. Carlos Rivera's Echoes proves his more than a moment. From Titanium Sound Studios to Spotify, the Carlos Rivera story. The album climbed the charts faster than Thomas had predicted. Top 200 by noon. Top 100 by evening. By the end of the week, it was sitting at number 47 on the Billboard 200, and 3 songs had made it onto viral playlists with millions of followers. Carlos watched the numbers with a sense of unreality. He was still living in the same apartment, still sleeping on the same broken couch. Emma still went to the same school, still needed help with homework, still asked if they could get a dog someday when they had more space. His life hadn't changed in the ways that mattered, but apparently it had changed in ways the world cared about. The reviews were mixed but mostly positive. Rivera's voice carries the weight of lived experience. This isn't manufactured emotion. It's the real thing, raw and unpolished and utterly compelling. While the production is occasionally sparse and the lyrics lean toward the obvious, Rivera's vocal performance elevates even the weakest material. There's an honesty here that most artists spend their whole careers trying to fake. Not every song lands, but the ones that do, hit like a freight train. Track 4, November Rain, is a devastating meditation on loss. Track 7, Invisible, is an anthem for everyone who's ever felt unseen. This is a strong debut from an artist worth watching. But not everyone was impressed. Carlos Rivera's story is compelling, but his music is pedestrian. Competent vocals can't save generic songwriting. This album feels like it's trading on sympathy rather than artistry. It's fine, just fine, which is disappointing given the hype. Rivera has a good voice, but good voices are everywhere. What made his viral video special was the context. Without that, he's just another singer with sad songs about hard times. David sent Carlos screenshots of both kinds of reviews. "Don't read them," David texted. "Critics are going to critic. Focus on the numbers. Those tell the real story." But Carlos read them anyway. All of them. The good ones that made him feel like maybe he wasn't a fraud. The bad ones that confirmed every fear he'd carried since this started. He was a janitor pretending to be an artist. A one-hit wonder stretched into an album. A sympathy case that people would forget as soon as the next viral moment came along. And then Emma came home from school with a drawing. "We had to draw our heroes today," she said, holding up the paper. "I drew you." It was crude the way 7-year-old art was crude. A stick figure with curly hair holding a microphone. Musical notes floating around him. At the bottom, in K-full block letters, M.Y. Daddy the Singer. Carlos put the drawing on the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. Every time doubt crept in over the next few weeks, he'd look at that drawing and remember why he was doing this. Not for critics, not for charts, for Emma, for Maria, for everyone who'd ever been told their voice didn't matter. The first live performance was scheduled for November, a small venue in Los Angeles called The Echo. Capacity 300. Thomas thought it was the right size to start. Intimate, manageable, low stakes. Carlos was terrified. He'd performed before, years ago, but never like this. Never with expectations. Never with people who'd paid money specifically to hear him. Never with the weight of a viral video and a debut album and 1,000 opinions about whether he deserved to be there. The week before the show, he rehearsed constantly. Mike helped him work through arrangements, figure out which songs would translate live, how to pace the set. David hired a small band. Guitar, keys, minimal drums. Thomas watched rehearsals and offered quiet suggestions. "You're overthinking it," Thomas said after one particularly frustrated run-through. "You're trying to be perfect instead of being yourself. The people coming to this show don't want perfection. They want the guy from the video. Honest, raw, real. What if I'm not good enough? Then you're not good enough. But you'll have tried. Most people don't even get that far." The night of the show, Carlos threw up twice. Once at home, once in the venue bathroom. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the microphone during soundcheck. Emma was with Mrs. Kowalski. David was handling logistics. Thomas was somewhere in the back, giving Carlos space to be nervous. The venue filled up. 300 people. Some were industry types, Carlos could tell. Checking their phones, sipping expensive drinks, looking bored before the show even started. But most were regular people. Young and old. Different races, different backgrounds. Some wore T-shirts with Carlos's face on them, which was surreal and uncomfortable. Others held phones, ready to record. At 8 p.m., the lights dimmed. Carlos walked onto the small stage. The microphone was waiting. The band was ready. 300 people were watching. He opened his mouth to introduce himself and nothing came out. Panic squeezed his chest. This was a mistake. He wasn't a performer. He was a janitor who'd gotten lucky with a viral video and was now about to humiliate himself in front of 300 people and whoever they'd post videos to online. Then someone in the audience shouted, "We love you, Carlos." Just that. Simple. Genuine. Carlos's throat loosened. He smiled. "Thanks. I'm really nervous." The audience laughed. Not mean. Supportive. "I'm going to sing some songs," Carlos said. "They're about my life. Some of them are sad. Some of them are about hope. All of them are true. I hope you like them." The band started. Carlos closed his eyes and sang. The first song was Invisible, the one about working night shifts and being unseen and wondering if your life mattered to anyone. His voice shook on the first verse, steadied by the second, soared on the chorus. When he opened his eyes, people were swaying. Some were crying. One woman in the front row had her hand over her heart. The second song was about Maria. The third about Emma. The fourth about grief. The fifth about survival. By the sixth song, Carlos had stopped being afraid. His voice was strong. The band was tight. The audience was with him, completely, offering their attention like a gift. When he sang November Rain, the song about Maria dying in a hospital room while he held her hand and promised he'd take care of their daughter, the entire venue went silent. Carlos could hear his own breathing. The guitar, his voice carrying the melody like a weight he'd been holding for years and was finally allowed to set down. The song ended. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then applause. Not polite. Thunderous. People were standing. Some were openly weeping. Carlos stood on the stage feeling like he'd just run a marathon and won and lost at the same time. He played 2 more songs. The venue wouldn't let him leave without an encore. He sang an acoustic version of Echoes of Us, the Vivian Cross song that started everything. But this time it was his. His arrangement. His emotion. His story. When he finished, the standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Backstage, Thomas was waiting with a bottle of water and a smile. "You did it," Thomas said. "You're a real artist now." Carlos drank the water. His hands were still shaking. I don't feel like a real artist. That's how you know you are one. Real artists never feel like they're good enough. Frauds are the only ones who feel confident. David appeared with his phone. You're trending again. Videos from tonight are everywhere. Every music blog is covering this. Carlos, you just went from viral moment to legitimate artist. This changes everything. But Carlos wasn't thinking about trending or blogs or changes. He was thinking about the woman in the front row with her hand over her heart. About the way the room had gone silent during November rain. About Emma's drawing on his refrigerator. He was thinking about Maria, and whether she could see this somehow, and whether she'd be proud. He hoped so. God, he hoped so. The next morning, interview requests flooded in. Major morning shows, late-night television, podcasts, magazines. David organized them into a schedule that looked impossible but apparently wasn't. Carlos found himself sitting in green rooms, getting makeup applied, answering questions about his journey from janitor to recording artist like it was a story that made sense instead of a chaotic series of accidents and desperation. On one show, the host asked about Vivian Cross. Have you spoken to her since the incident? No, Carlos said. Would you want to? Carlos thought about it. About the woman who'd asked him to sing so she could mock him, who'd gotten him fired, who tried to destroy his credibility when the video went viral. Did he want to speak to her? I think she was scared, Carlos said finally. I think she heard something in my voice that threatened her, and she reacted the way people do when they are scared. They try to eliminate the threat. I don't hate her. I just hope she learned something from this. The host looked surprised. The audience applauded. The clip went viral. 2 days later, Carlos received a private message on social media. From a verified account he recognized. Vivian Cross. His thumb hovered over it for a full minute before he opened it. You're right. I was scared. I'm sorry for what I did. Your voice is extraordinary. I hope you know that. I hope you keep singing. You deserve it more than most of us. V. Carlos read it 3 times. He showed it to David, who wanted to screenshot it and make it public. Carlos said no. Some things didn't need to be public. Some apologies were meant to be private. He typed back, "Thank you. I forgive you. Good luck with everything." And then he closed the app and went home to Emma, who wanted help with her Venus project and didn't care about Vivian Cross of viral videos or any of it. She just wanted a dad. And Carlos was learning that was enough. That was everything. Approximate word count, 2,000 words. 6 months later, in April, Carlos stood in a conference room at Resonance Records. Not to sign with them. To decline their second offer. The album had sold 200,000 copies. Not platinum. Not gold. But enough to prove Carlos wasn't a one-time phenomenon. Enough to justify a second album. Every label that had passed on him initially was now calling. Bigger advances. Better terms. Promises of radio play and promotional tours, and everything that came with real industry backing. But Carlos had learned something in those 6 months. Success wasn't just numbers. It was sustainability. It was waking up and still recognizing yourself in the mirror. It was being able to look Emma in the eye and know you hadn't traded your soul for a bigger paycheck. "We're offering $150 advance," Jennifer said. Her red lipstick was the same. Her pitch was smoother. 3 albums. Full promotional support. "Carlos, you've proven yourself. Now let us take you to the next level." "I appreciate the offer," Carlos said. "But I'm staying with Thomas. Thomas Gray can't compete with what we're offering. He doesn't have the infrastructure, the connections, the budget. No, but he has integrity, and that matters more to me than infrastructure." Jennifer's smile tightened. "You're making a mistake. In 2 years, you'll be forgotten, and you'll wish you'd taken this deal." "Maybe," Carlos said, "but at least I'll still be myself." He left. David was waiting in the car, shaking his head. "You just turned down $150,000. I know. Thomas can't match that. Ever. I know that too. So why?" Carlos looked out the window at the Los Angeles skyline, at the city that had swallowed him whole years ago and was now spitting him back out transformed. "Because Maria would have wanted me to choose the music over the money. And Emma needs to see that doing the right thing matters more than doing the profitable thing." David was quiet for a moment. Then, "You're either the most principled artist I've ever managed or the most stubborn." Possibly both. Definitely both. They drove back to Thomas's loft. The old man was waiting with coffee and a smile. I heard you turned down resonance, Thomas said. Word travels fast. It does when you make insane decisions. Do you know how much money that was? Enough to pay off every debt I have and then some. And yet you said no. Thomas handed Carlos a mug. Why? Because 6 months ago, you cried when you heard my music. That's worth more than money. Thomas nodded slowly. All right then. Let's make album 2. And let's make it even better than album 1. They spent the next 4 months recording. 12 songs this time. Broader range. More experimentation. Carlos wrote half the songs himself now. His voice had strengthened with use. His confidence had grown. He wasn't pretending to be an artist anymore. He was becoming one. The second album was called Still Standing. It dropped in September. Debuted at number 19 on the Billboard 200. 3 singles hit the top 40 on streaming platforms. Reviews were better this time. Even the skeptics admitted Carlos had evolved. And then, in October, exactly 1 year after everything started, Carlos got a call that changed everything again. Mr. Rivera. A woman's voice he didn't recognize. Professional. East Coast accent. Yes. This is Amanda Wright from the Recording Academy. I'm calling to inform you that you've been nominated for a music award. Best New Artist category. Carlos sat down. The world tilted sideways. I'm sorry. What? Best New Artist. The ceremony is in February. Congratulations. This is a significant honor. She gave him details he didn't absorb. Dates. Locations. Protocols. When she hung up, Carlos sat in his apartment staring at his phone like it was an alien object. Nominated for Best New Artist. Him. A janitor from Van Nuys who'd been fired for singing too well. He called David. Then Thomas. Then Mrs. Kowalski, who cried and said she always knew he was special. Then he sat Emma down and tried to explain what this meant. It's like a big award for singing, he said. Really big. Lots of famous people get nominated. Are you going to win? Probably not, baby. But being nominated is still amazing. I think you'll win, Emma said with 7-year-old certainty. Because you're the best singer in the whole world. Carlos hugged her. She was 8 now, growing so fast. Maria would barely recognize her. That thought hate, but differently than it used to. The pain had edges now instead of being an endless black thing that consumed everything. The award ceremony was 3 months away. Carlos tried not to think about it. He focused on touring. Small venues at first, then slightly bigger ones. His shows sold out, not because of the viral video anymore, but because the music was good. Because his voice reached people. He played in Seattle, Portland, Denver, Chicago, New York. Every night, different faces in the crowd. Same experience. People crying during November rain. People singing along to Invisible. People staying after shows to tell him their stories, their losses, their survival. Your music saved my life, a woman in Chicago told him. She was in her 50s, dressed professionally, tears streaming down her face. I was planning to end it. Then I heard Still Standing. And I decided to stay 1 more day. Then another. Then another. Carlos didn't know what to say to that. What do you say when someone tells you your voice was the difference between life and death? I'm glad you stayed, he managed finally. The world needs you in it. She hugged him. He let her. This was part of it too. Not just the music, but the aftermath. The way art connected strangers. The way pain shared became pain lessened. In February, Carlos flew to Los Angeles for the award ceremony. Emma came with him. David bought her a dress. Thomas paid for a hotel suite. They got ready together like a strange found family. Carlos in a rented tux. Emma in her dress, twirling in front of the mirror. You look like a princess, Mija. You look like a prince, Daddy. I look like a janitor in a costume. No. She turned serious. You look like a singer. A real one. The ceremony was surreal. Thousands of people. Cameras everywhere. Famous faces Carlos had only seen on screens were suddenly real and present. He sat in his assigned seat with David on one side and Thomas on the other, feeling like an imposter who'd accidentally walked into the wrong room. When they announced the Best New Artist category, Carlos's heart stopped. They showed a clip from each nominee. His was from the Titanium Sound Studios video, the one that started everything. 30 seconds of him singing echoes of us in that booth. His voice filled the arena. On screen, his face showed everything he'd been feeling. Fear, grief, hope, truth. The presenter opened the envelope. And the winner is... Time stretched. Carlos thought about Maria, about Emma, about pushing a cleaning cart through marble lobbies and wondering if his life would ever mean anything. Carlos Rivera. The arena erupted. David was grabbing his arm. Thomas was crying. Emma was jumping up and down screaming, "Daddy won! Daddy won!" Carlos walked to the stage in a daze. Someone handed him a trophy. It was heavier than he expected. The microphone was in front of him. Thousands of eyes watching. Millions more watching at home. He looked at the trophy, at the crowd, at Emma in the front row with her hands over her heart the way that woman at his first show had done. "I don't have a speech prepared," Carlos said. His voice echoed through the arena. "A year ago, I was a janitor. I was invisible. I was one missed shift away from losing everything. Then I sang a song, and someone heard it, and everything changed." He paused, trying to find the words. "This isn't just my award. It's for everyone who's ever felt invisible. Everyone who's been told they don't matter. Everyone who survived when surviving felt impossible. Your voice matters. Your story matters. Don't let anyone make you small." He looked at Emma. "And thank you to my daughter, who reminded me what I was fighting for. I love you, Mija." He left the stage to another standing ovation. Backstage, press was waiting. Questions coming fast. How did it feel? What's next? Who do you want to thank? Carlos answered them all, but his mind was elsewhere. On a hospital room 3 years ago. On Maria's hand in his. On her last words. "Make sure Emma knows she's loved. And Carlos, don't give up on your music. Promise me." He'd promised. And he'd kept that promise. Against every odd. Through every hardship. Past every moment when giving up seemed easier. This trophy was proof that promises mattered. That voices mattered. That janitors could become artists and invisible people could become seen, and pain could transform into something beautiful if you were brave enough to sing it out loud. Later that night, back in the hotel suite, Emma asleep in the bedroom and the trophy sitting on the table catching the light, Carlos called the one person he needed to talk to. "Mrs. Kowalski, did you watch?" "Oh, honey, I watched. I cried through the whole thing. You were wonderful. Thank you. For everything. For watching Emma. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. That's what family does, Carlos. And your family." When he hung up, Carlos walked to the window. Los Angeles spread out below him, a sea of lights in the darkness. Somewhere in that city, other janitors were pushing carts through empty buildings. Other single parents were wondering how to pay rent. Other invisible people were trying to survive one more day. His voice had reached some of them. He knew that from the messages, the stories people shared at shows. But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough. There would always be more people in darkness than his music could reach. But he'd try anyway. That's what Maria would have wanted. That's what Emma needed to see. That trying mattered even when the odds were impossible. Carlos looked at the trophy one more time. Then he looked at Emma's drawing, the one he'd carried with him from the apartment. My daddy the singer. Not a janitor anymore. Not invisible. Just a man with a voice who'd been given a chance and refused to waste it. The next morning, Carlos did something he'd been planning for months. He called Thomas. "I want to start a foundation," Carlos said. "For kids like Emma. Single-parent households. Families struggling to survive. I want to fund music programs. Instruments. Lessons. Everything that makes music accessible to people who can't afford it. That's going to cost a lot of money. I know. So I need to make more money. Which means more albums. More tours. More work. You're sure? You could coast on this success for a while. Take time with Emma." "I'm sure." Maria believed music saved lives. "I want to prove she was right." Thomas was quiet for a moment. Then, "All right. Let's do it. Let's change the world." They started small. One school in Van Nuys. Emma's school. Carla showed up on a Wednesday with instruments and a check and a promise. Every kid who wanted to learn music would get the chance. The program was named after Maria, the Rivera Foundation for Musical Education. Within a year, it expanded to 5 schools, then 10, then 20. Carlos poured his money and time into it. He visited schools, taught classes, showed kids that their voices mattered even if they came from places where people told them otherwise. Emma grew up watching her father build something bigger than music. She learned that success wasn't about trophies or charts or fame. It was about using what you had to help others. It was about remembering where you came from and making sure the door stayed open for people behind you. 5 years later, Carla stood on stage at the Hollywood Bowl. 20,000 people in the audience. His 4th album had just gone platinum. The foundation was operating in 200 schools across the country. Emma was 13, sitting front row, still believing her father was the best singer in the whole world. Before his final song, Carla spoke to the crowd. I want to tell you about a woman named Maria. She was my wife. She died believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. Everything I've done, every song I've sung, every kid we've helped through the foundation, it's because she refused to let me give up on my voice. He paused, looking at Emma. And I want to tell you about my daughter, who drew a picture of me when I was just a janitor with a viral video and called me a singer, who believed I was more than what the world saw, who's taught me that the most important thing we can do is love each other and fight for each other and never stop believing that better things are possible. The crowd cheered. Carlos picked up his guitar. This last song is called For Maria. I wrote it the night I won Best New Artist. It's about promises kept and voices found and love that doesn't end just because someone dies. It's about all of us. Everyone who survived. Everyone who struggled. Everyone who stood back up after being knocked down. He played. His voice filled the bowl, strong and clear and carrying the weight of every year, every hardship, every moment of doubt transformed into music. When he finished, the standing ovation lasted 10 minutes. And somewhere, Carlos hoped, Maria was listening.